Every day a holiday when you yasha with Topstar. Get the Super DTH combo decoder complete with a satellite dish plus 1 month Super Bouquet subscription for only 249 kwacha. Or get the DTT HD decoder complete with aerial plus 1 month of classic bouquet subscription for only 109 kwacha. Current subscribers get an everyday holiday too by receiving 2 weeks of free bouquet upgrade. Topstar. Enjoy digital life.
Diamond TV, television reinvented.
Good evening, you're watching Bizweek with me, Winston Mavora, and today we will be looking at the 2018 business trends. Now, you know the 2018 is quite an interesting year because a lot indeed has been happening with regards business and of course what has been happening in the Zambian economy. And my guest to have this particular special last show of the year is none other than the gentleman himself, the researcher from the Center for Trade Policy and Development, who is Bright Chizonde.
Thank you. It's good to be here again.
Okay, so just to kickstart this conversation, Mr. Chizonde, I know that 2018 has been quite an interesting year, and both, of course, from a research perspective, and also from just what has been happening within the economic fraternity. Now, the Minister of Finance today has released a statement that sort of gives an overview of how the economy has performed, based on the quarterly reviews that she's been given. In other words, I'll just call it a compilation of the quarterly review, which has a summary. What is your view on that particular statement?
I think looking at comparatively with the 2019 budget performance, because the 2019 also had a segment where there's a review of the economic performance. This economic performance is more or less the same. There isn't much of a difference because they take away the actual things that are going on in terms of the macroeconomic changes and the fiscal policy changes have just remained the same. So there isn't much value addition per se.
Okay. One of the interesting things that you'll find in that particular statement is a line, either, I think first, if not, then second line in the first paragraph that talks about, the issue of developing or building a resilient economy. Looking at the external shocks that characterized 2018, starting from, the increment of fuel prices, coming to the fluctuating of the copper prices, though fairly stable, but of course the impact is always there, the depreciation of the kwacha, Do you think that we indeed built a resilient economy?
I think we see the Zambian economy is still heavily dependent on the copper, the mining sector. And we see that even looking at, for example, the contribution of the mining sector in terms of government tax revenue, in 2017 we're talking about 8.8 billion kwacha, compared to the 23 billion kwacha, which is total tax revenue for 2017. So we see that's about 23% of government tax revenue coming from the mining sector. So we are still heavily dependent on the mining sector. So in terms of if copper prices fluctuate and there are different shocks which target the mining sector, and then their production cycle reduces, of course the address shows that production is going to increase even moving forward to 2018. But the copper price shocks still heavily affect the country because we haven't diversified. I think we have been talking about the issue of diversification for a long time now. The diversification the Center for Trade Policy and Development is now advocating for is not only in the away from the mining sector, but there is need also to diversify within the mining sector to other minerals as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are interesting thoughts over there, and when you begin to look at the issue of the copper prices, the Central Statistics Office, gave us statistics which are indicating a slight decrease, I think 0.4% decrease on the copper price. And obviously we know that has potential to impact on our economy, which still depends on these external shocks. But moving on, one of the most, pronouncements that really was timely in 2018, when you look at where the Zambian economy is and where we were looking to go looking at our set targets with regards to fiscal achievement was the issue of austerity measures.
Yes.
Do you think that government indeed adhered to austerity measures?
Okay, I think the aspect of austerity and with regards to the theme of fiscal consolidation has, of course, brought a lot of questions from different stakeholders. I think the problem that we have most of the time is that we want to make it very technical so that the layman cannot understand what we're talking about. So fiscal consolidation simply means bridging the gap between expenditure and revenues from the government. If you look at, so the best way therefore to measure whether the government has been pursuing the goal for fiscal consolidation is to look at whether the fiscal deficit has widened or narrowed. So if you look at the year under review 2018, the fiscal deficit is projected to be about 7% of GDP when we target it to be at 6.1% of GDP. So we have 0.9% above the target. So that indicates that our expenditure was rising faster, way faster than our revenues. So there is no consolidation there. So generally, people want to make it very technical, but looking at those measurements, it means that the government has, if you look at the revenue targets, the government has managed to beat the revenue targets. But instead of being below the expenditure target, they also beat the expenditure target. So if you want fiscal consolidation, you can go beyond the revenue target, you can generate more revenues, but at the same time, you are not supposed to go above the expenditure targets because that would mean that you are not bridging the gap as indicated by the fiscal deficit.
Okay. 0974001218 is the number that you simply have to call to be able to participate on this particular discussion that is indeed focusing and centering on the 2018 business trends. And you indeed talked about the issue of
Events, we create and paint those unforgettable memories for that elegant and dream event to wrap up the year. Creative, innovative, classy, and excellence. Yes, this is us at Easy Events. So end your year on a high note with us. We have Tiffany chairs, cocktail tables, linen, red carpets, and of course, a special centerpieces and decor items. Planning events can be a nightmare, but you don't have to panic because at Easy, we make it easy. So give us a call on 0965 541 064 or you can email easyevents18@gmail.com.
Welcome back, and you're still watching Bizweek. We sincerely apologize for that technical glitch that did interrupt our meaningful conversation. But we're still glad that you're indeed a part of us. And of course, today we're discussing the 2018 business trends. And of course, we're discussing a few important highlights of 2018 with regards business and the Zambian economic scene. Now, Bright, we were talking about the issue of, the fiscal, deficit,
Yes.
The fiscal trajectory of Zambia. So maybe on that, what I would love to find out is the issue of looking at where we are. We've talked so much. We've set fiscal targets, Adding to what you were saying, do you think that we've shown enough commitment besides what we've said?
So I think we haven't seen much commitment because you know what you're looking at here when we pronounce to say fiscal consolidation has actually been a theme for I think about 3 or 4 different budgets now in the past. So we have been singing this song. It's becoming almost like rhetoric now. We need to reduce the fiscal deficit if we are really pushing for fiscal consolidation. Because in the end, if we do not implement these policies, we have been talking about austerity measures. Austerity seems to be on the revenue side, where people are subjected to higher taxes. People can feel it that the revenue side is increasing. But on the expenditure side, instead of us mitigating, we are still spending on what I call non-economic activities. For example, we seem to be more focused on the supply side of things in the market instead of, for example, the issue of the airports. Instead of looking at first of all bringing in more tourists in the country, the demand aspects of it, encouraging or stimulating the tourism sector and bringing in all these the service sector so as to bring in more people. We are just having this supply mentality to say that we need more airports, when in fact we already have excess capacity in terms of our airports terminals. So we see ourselves more focused on the supply side. The issue of construction of roads, for example. We are supplying or constructing roads going to different places which are not even economic to say. There's no economic activity on the other side.
Okay, we seem to have a caller. Yes. You're through to Beeswick. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very much okay. Quickly, what is your contribution and comment on the program?
Yes, sir. Evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening.
I'm all right, and you? I'm Wete calling you from Mumba. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I think looking at the business-wise, businesses have performed this 2018. I think businesses have not been so easy to handle. I think the business people who have been involved, it has been tough for us to do business. So we implore the government at least to do something, especially at least to make the environment more at least easy, even for small scale, businessmen to do business. Unlike what is going on, unlike what is going on, only those who are big, in business are the ones that are faring well.
Okay, thank you very much. There, indeed, valuable contribution with regards the macro environment. Now, one of the questions that also I think maybe should tally with that is the issue of looking at Zambia's macro environment.
Yes.
From the 2018 debt that we've seen increasing, the external debt exponentially, do you think that that has also contributed to making the business environment somewhat hostile, for lack of a better term? And also, what are your expectations through the same debt lens of 2018 for 2019?
Okay, so I think the gentleman was bringing sentiments with regards to high interest rates for SMEs. And the rise in domestic debt is a factor that has to play with regards to the high interest rates, because if government is borrowing a lot in the domestic market, it means that most lenders like banks and the like would like to give money to government because of the reduced risk instead of extending to SMEs, so that increases the interest rates. So that is why perhaps he's been citing to say things have not been easy for small businesses in the country. And of course, based on the address the minister just recently gave, lending rates seem to have declined slightly, but again they've gone up to about 24%. So they have just remained roughly the same throughout the whole 2018 period.
From 24.6 to 20, is it 24.4 to 24.1? Really,
there isn't much of a change.
Exactly, there isn't much of a change,
Definitely.
and that is an issue that the majority of consumers, SMEs, and entrepreneurs across the board have been advocating to say, in as much as these efforts are being made by the central bank and relevant authorities, there must be that trickle-down effect. There must be that, capital availability. But of course, how does it happen if there's a huge debt?
Yes, definitely. And looking forward, you said, what are my focus for 2019? If you notice, you look at the 2019 budget proposals in terms of government revenue collection, the target for domestic resource mobilization has been increased. So what that entails is that the government will collect more revenues or more taxes from the people next year. Yes,
you can say that again.
Which is just starting tomorrow, yes. So we're expecting government to up its game. And if you look at all the targets, or for example, macroeconomic goals that the government has set, or generally objectives, The one for domestic resource mobilization is the one that they have achieved more or less, apart from the inflation target. So domestic resource mobilization, we are good at that. So if the government is upping the target, you expect more taxes to be collected next year. And it means that the strain that the Zambian people have experienced in terms of the revenue streams being sucked out from them in terms of income and taxes is going to increase in moving on to 2019. Yes.
0974001218 is a number that you simply have to call to be able to get to participate on the program. And of course, let us know what you think about the 2018 business year, or maybe 2018 as a year, but of course from a business perspective, and of course some of the happenings in our economy. Now, Bright, I'm not really against taxes. I'm not a person that opposes taxes, because taxes are an important aspect of development,
Yes.
and of course, revenue. But don't you think that somehow there's a mismatch in our setup in terms of, the taxes that we introduce and the opportunities that must be created or should be created in the economy to allow the citizens to be in a position where they can make the money and contribute to the national treasury?
Yes, even the Center for Trade Policy and Development is not against taxes. Basically, I think we believe the policy environment, or the framework of government action, moves from revenue. So government needs to have significant amounts of revenues. So they need to collect sufficient taxes. So we should start from the tax aspect. Then we look at government policies. That is the second stage. So what are the policies? What are they going to spend those taxes on? Then the last, which is the most critical, is the implementation of those policies. So 3 phases. But then we need to look at the taxes. Government needs to collect sufficient taxes. We're not against having more revenues, because that is the whole aspect of understanding behind austerity and fiscal consolidation. We need more taxes. We need more domestic resource mobilization. The problem is we are targeting the same income earners. So the same people the same individual earners who pay as you earn are subjected to different streams of tax and non-tax measures from government. So in the end, the effective tax rate is quite high. So in our proposals before the 2019 budget was presented, we presented tax proposals that the government should increase taxes towards the mining sector. Because for a long time, a lot of Zambians have been complaining that they are not seeing the benefits of having the mining sector around, and they believe that the endowments, the copper endowments that we have, are being depleted without seeing the benefits of those minerals. So we advocated for an increase in the mineral tax, and you see that there was an implementation of that policy in the budget. We advocated for a number of those tax changes, targeting specifically the mining sector, because we've been doing a lot of work in the mining sector. And the mining companies have been projecting this view that they are struggling and business is not well. But if you check the 2016 to 2017 financial year for Glencore, which is a parent company for Mopani, they declared dividends, about 2.9 billion US dollars, giving out to their shareholders. And their profits increased by 400%. So we have this mindset that the mining companies are struggling, but if you look at the actual information on the ground, you ask other stakeholders, and we have heard a lot of these investors in the mining sector bragging out there, saying that they are making significant profits. So we pushed for these changes in the mining sector, and the government, we can say, accepted those proposals and implemented some of the changes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I love the fact that you've actually taken us to the mining sector. And when you look at what is happening right now, there is an impasse, between government and various mining firms concerning the recently tax proposals that some will be in effect actually tomorrow, and, sales tax 1st of April.
Yes.
But these measures are law as we speak. Parliament has already approved them, and as we speak, there's still not a concrete agreement in terms of the way forward between the government and the mining sector. Do you think that these particular maybe concerns or nonchalancy that we're seeing from the mining sector, will it yield any result? Because these are already laws that have been passed by Parliament.
So we have a historic situation where the mining sector players have always been threatening government. When there's a tax change of the mining tax regime, there's an adjustment, maybe introduction. You remember the case of introducing windfall tax. It was fought so much that it was reversed by the next government. So we have seen this historic back and forth in the mining sector, where the government introduces these new taxes, and then the mining sector threatens to to lay off workers, and then this also goes on and just like that. But I think if you look at the mining players' arguments, they're anchored on two issues. First of all, they're advocating for a stable mining tax regime. Mm-hmm. They do not want a mining tax policy to be changing every successive government or every year. Mm-hmm. This is because when you look at copper returns, the way the industry works, you can invest today and the returns come even up to 10 years. That's when you are seeing the returns for that investment. So it's a long-term kind of investment. So they want stability to predict how much they're going to get. And that's a very logic argument. But then what we have seen, the challenge is that they continue fighting government. So government is looking for an optimal tax policy. They want to reach a level where they believe they're getting sufficient taxes from the mines. And if the mines continue fighting back and forth, threatening government, and then they reverse and then again reintroduce, there won't be that stability that they're looking for. So if they want the mining tax regime to be stable, they need to accept these changes. These changes are going to benefit the Zambian people because they would mean that, for example, mineral tax will no longer be deductible from income tax, meaning that the government will collect more revenues. And in this situation of austerity, the government is not likely to back down. You know, the situation where you have increasing debt and you have already imposed high taxes on the citizens. The only thing that you have to do is now target the mines. So in this situation, you don't expect the government to back down. The mining companies have also been advocating for you maintain the tax rates, but then they just increase their production. So more or less like a tax regime that stimulates an increase in the growth of the mining sector. So that's what that is trying to say is that you want to collect almost the same percentage of taxes for the Zambian people, but the tax revenue increases only because the mining companies are producing far much more. I think that argument is a bit flawed. It has a problem because essentially you're telling the Zambian people that you collect the same amount of taxes. If you want your revenues to increase in terms of tax, the share remains the same, but you want us to deplete more of the copper reserves. So it's in other words, we're advocating for the reserves to deplete even faster, but then maintaining the share that the Zambian people get in terms of tax revenues. That is not the best solution. So the government is pushing for the actual share to be increased so that they benefit more in the mining sector. Yes.
Interesting perspective there from the Center for Trade Policy and Development. But another thing, of course, emanating is the issue of the sales tax. That is one of the major highlights, I believe, for 2018 as we look at it from a business and economic lens. As we get to wrap up this conversation, do you think that there is ample time for the implementation of sales tax, considering the fact that so far we've not been given details of the nitty-gritties that should ensure that the implementation is successful?
I think a 3 months period is somewhat limited for the implementation of such a tax because it's complex. I think people should appreciate the fact that this is not as simple to implement as, let's say, VAT, for example. It's a bit complex because there is need for exemptions for some commodities as you produce on different chains of production. Because if you don't do that, then the effective tax rate, the rate itself may even shoot up and go beyond the 16% previous VAT that we are talking of. So the tax itself imposed on the commodities may even be higher than 100% if it's not strategically implemented. So there is need for an implementation framework in terms of the tax policy itself. It needs to be developed. There's need for changes in terms of legislation regards the sales tax. So all these things need to be put in place. So I think the 3 months period seems to be somewhat limited. But
you've talked about the amount slightly being higher than the VAT. Close sources have indicated that we're looking at between 9 to 12%. Is this good enough? Looking at the current economic fundamentals on the average Zambian, is it good enough?
I think a lower sales tax rate will be good, 9 to 12%, as you are suggesting. I think that will be fine because it's less than 16%. The issue I was talking about is with regard to how it is implemented. So if it's properly implemented, then a lower tax rate. The good part is that this can generate even more revenues because there's no aspect of being you remember the VAT, there were refunds with VAT, but with the sales tax there are no refunds. So essentially it means that the government can even collect more revenues even if the rate is less than 16%. The issue is implementation. So the way it is going to be implemented, different commodities, different aspects need to be put correctly so that the cost is not passed on to the final consumers.
Thank you very much for coming through to Biz with Mr. Chizonde and discussing to obviously review just how 2018 has been, looking at some of the hallmark happenings that did characterize the economic scene of Zambia. And emanating from this particular conversation, of course, we have issues to do with sales tax, the contentious impasse in the mining sector, and also looking forward on how 2018 would be from the increasing lens of the Zambian current external debt. The name is Wenson Mavoro. My guest has been Bright Chizonde from City PD. And of course, we will see you in 2019 as we get to look at the implementation of the proposed tax measures in the 2019 national budget. Have a lovely evening.